Lily, an artist struggling to make ends meet, finds an abandoned puppy and decides to save it. The next day, a mysterious man knocks on her door, claiming the dog. But who is the man and why is he so desperate to find it? The rain poured down heavily, as if the sky were collapsing over the city. Lily walked along the wet sidewalk, holding her bag of paintings under her arm while trying to shield herself with an old, slightly torn umbrella. The day had been long, filled with frustrating attempts to sell her work at a local gallery. She was a young artist full of dreams, but life seemed relentless. The bills were piling up, and rent was about to be due. But that was nothing new to her. One step at a time, she thought to herself, trying to keep hope alive. That was when she heard something. A faint sound, almost imperceptible, coming from a dark alley to her left. It sounded like a whimper, muffled by the noise of the rain. Curious and concerned, Lily hesitated for a moment. "It's probably just the wind," she murmured, but her heart told her otherwise. She took a few cautious steps toward the sound, and there he was, a soaked dog shivering from the cold, his big, frightened eyes locked onto hers. He was injured, with a wounded paw, and it looked like he had been there for hours. Lily felt a tightness in her chest. There was no way she could ignore that look. She knew she didn't have much space at home or extra money to take care of herself, let alone an animal, but she also knew she couldn't leave him there. "Oh God, what am I going to do with you?" she said, crouching down to take a closer look. Carefully, she picked up the dog and wrapped him in her coat, even though he was dirty and soaking wet. "It's okay, buddy. We'll figure this out." She took him home, setting up a cozy little spot with some old towels. As she cleaned his wounds and gave him water, she realized he was more than just an abandoned dog. There was something special about him, a kind of light in his eyes that seemed to say, "I still trust people." She smiled and decided to call him Lucky. "Lucky, because today is your lucky day," she joked, though she knew the truth was quite the opposite. The next day, when the sun finally came out, Lily woke up early to make breakfast. She was trying to figure out how she would take care of Lucky without spending too much since every penny counted. That was when someone knocked on the door. She frowned, surprised. Who could it be this early? When she opened the door, she saw a tall, well-dressed man standing at the entrance. He looked nervous, his hands buried in the pockets of an expensive coat. His eyes scanned the small apartment until they landed on Lucky, who was lying in a corner, licking his injured paw. The man's eyes widened, and he swallowed hard before saying, in a voice rough with emotion, "That dog. He's all I have left." Lily's heart pounded. She didn't know what to say. Those words were heavy, filled with meaning. She looked at Lucky, then at the man, and she felt that this story was about to change her life forever. The man at the door was Thomas, and from the moment Lily saw him standing there, with his impeccable clothes and formal posture, she knew he didn't belong to her world, at least not the world she knew. He seemed out of place in her small, messy apartment, surrounded by stacks of canvases and books scattered across the table. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of pain and hope, that made Lily open the door without hesitation. "Please, tell me he's okay," Thomas said, pointing at Lucky, who was now watching the stranger curiously while licking his injured paw. His voice was hoarse, as if every word was an effort. Lily nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. "He's hurt, but he'll recover. I took care of him last night." Thomas let out a deep breath, as if he had just released an enormous weight from his shoulders. His posture visibly relaxed, and he ran a hand over his face, trying to compose himself. "Thank God," he murmured, almost to himself. I thought I'd never see him again." As the two sat at the kitchen table, Thomas began to tell his story. The dog, he explained, had belonged to his late wife, Sarah. They had called him Max, but Lily had unknowingly given the animal a new name. "Sarah loved this dog," Thomas continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She cared for him like he was our child. When she passed away, he was the only thing I had left of her." He told her about the car accident that had happened months ago when Max escaped from the vehicle after the impact. Since then, Thomas had searched for him desperately, hiring private detectives and putting up posters all over the city. "I offered rewards, did everything I could," he said, shaking his head as if he still couldn't believe the dog was there, alive and relatively well. "But nothing worked. I thought he was dead, or worse, abandoned somewhere no one would ever find him." Lily listened in silence, her heart breaking for Thomas but also filled with admiration for Lucky, or Max, as he had once been called. She realized that this dog wasn't just an animal. He was a bridge between the past and the present, a living memory of someone Thomas had loved deeply. "You can spend some time with him," she said gently. "After all, he's a part of your life." Thomas smiled for the first time since he arrived, a fragile but sincere smile. He moved closer to Max and knelt beside him, carefully stroking his head. "I can't believe you're here," he whispered, as if speaking directly to the dog. "I've been looking for you for so long." Max tilted his head slightly, as if he understood every word. As they talked more, Lily learned that despite Thomas's fortune and success as a real estate magnate, he lived a lonely life. He confessed that after Sarah's death, he had lost interest in many things. "I became a shadow of who I used to be," he said, staring at the floor. "Money, power, none of it fills the emptiness left behind. I have everything anyone could ever want, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of nothing." Lily felt a pang of sadness at his words. She knew what it was like to feel alone, struggling to find meaning amid hardship. Despite her own struggles, she always tried to see the good in things, even when it was difficult. "People think money solves everything," she said thoughtfully. "But the truth is, when you lose someone you love, nothing seems to matter as much anymore." When Thomas offered her a generous reward for taking care of Max, Lily refused immediately. "I just did what anyone would do," she said with a shrug. But Thomas insisted. "Let me help you," he said, his voice firm. "You have no idea how much this means to me." That's when he had an idea. "I know how I can repay you," he continued, his eyes shining with renewed enthusiasm. "Let me help you achieve your dream. You're an artist, right? I can finance an exhibition for you. Use my connections to give your work the visibility it deserves." Lily's mouth fell open. It was as if the universe had given her both a slap in the face and a warm hug at the same time. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked hesitantly. Thomas smiled again, this time with more confidence. "Because you reminded me of something I had forgotten," he replied. "Kindness still exists in this world. And sometimes, it comes from where we least expect it." The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Lily. She could hardly believe what was happening. A man she barely knew, someone from a completely different world, was willing to invest in her dream. It was like winning the lottery without even buying a ticket. Thomas wasted no time. He began organizing everything with impressive efficiency, as if he were used to turning ideas into reality. "You have talent," he told her once while looking at one of her canvases. "But talent alone isn't enough. People need to see what you're capable of." Lily felt a knot in her stomach. Until that moment, her paintings had been like sealed letters, kept in boxes or hanging on the walls of her home. She had never considered exposing them to the world. "What if no one likes them?" she asked, biting her lip nervously. Thomas laughed, a warm and genuine sound that echoed through the apartment. "That won't happen," he replied confidently. "But even if it does, it doesn't define who you are. The important thing is to try." As preparations for the exhibition moved forward, something unexpected happened. Max, or Lucky, as Lily still liked to call him, became the link between them. They spent hours talking while taking care of him, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Lily discovered that Thomas wasn't just a wealthy and lonely businessman. He was also a man full of regrets. "I pushed people away after Sarah died," he admitted one day as they walked Max through the park. "I thought it would be easier that way, but I only ended up isolating myself even more." Lily knew exactly what he meant. She had felt that same sensation of being trapped in a bubble, unable to connect with others. But something had changed in her since she found Max taking care of him, even without having the resources, made her realize that small gestures can have a huge impact. "I think sometimes we need to lose something to understand what truly matters," she said thoughtfully. Thomas nodded, his eyes fixed on the dog running ahead of them. "Max taught me that," he said quietly. "He was the only thing that got me out of the house every day after Sarah was gone. And now he's brought you into my life." Finally, the big day arrived. The gallery Thomas had chosen was elegant, with white walls and soft lighting that highlighted each piece of art. Lily walked through the hallways, taking in the sight of her paintings displayed on the walls. It was surreal to see something so personal exposed to so many people. She felt a lump in her throat, but also a wave of pride. "You did it," Thomas said, approaching her with a smile. "And this is just the beginning." The exhibition was a success. People of all ages stopped to admire Lily's work, some even taking photos or jotting down notes. She had never imagined that her paintings could touch so many lives. During her opening speech, Lily shared her journey, how she had found Max on a rainy night and how that encounter had changed her life. "Small acts of kindness can make an enormous difference," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion. "Sometimes, we don't realize the impact our actions have on others. But when we choose to help, even without expecting anything in return, something magical happens." Thomas, standing beside her as she spoke, felt a tightness in his chest. He knew Lily was talking about Max, but he also realized her words applied to him. Over the years, he had shut himself off from the world, convinced that his pain was something he had to bear alone. But Lily had shown him that generosity, both hers and the kind he thought he had lost, still existed. By the end of the night, as people began to leave, Lily and Thomas were left alone in the gallery. Max was peacefully asleep in a corner, exhausted from all the excitement. "Do you think he knew this would happen?" Lily asked, pointing at the dog. Thomas chuckled. "Maybe he knew more than we did," he replied, winking at her.